The harsh twin suns beat down on the desolate planet of Drakvath, where human soldier Zane Mercer stumbles upon a young alien girl, abandoned and left to die. Her body is weak, but something in her eyes tells him she's more than just a casualty of war. As Zane decides to take her back to safety, he discovers a shocking secret. Her body is changing at an alarming rate, reacting to something he can't yet understand. But the transformation doesn't just put her at risk. It binds them together in a way no one could have predicted. Now hunted by both alien and human forces, Zane must protect her from enemies who will stop at nothing to capture her. What will happen when their bond becomes more powerful than either of them could control? The clock is ticking, and the truth is more dangerous than they can imagine. If you're new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The twin suns of Drakvath blaze down, their scorching heat burning the cracked barren ground beneath. The landscape stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of dust and decay where no life seemed to thrive. In the distance, the outline of an old settlement could be seen, its buildings barely standing against the harsh elements that had worn them down over time. The once thriving town now lay in ruins, a forgotten relic of a past that no longer mattered. Zane Mercer, a seasoned human soldier, trudged along the outskirts of the settlement, his heavy boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. His battle-worn armor clinked as he moved, the metal plates bearing the scars of countless battles fought across the galaxy. Despite the years of experience, the heat of Drakvath still made him sweat, and he wiped his brow with the back of his hand, grumbling under his breath. "Damn heat," he muttered, adjusting the supply pack slung across his back. His mission was simple, or at least it should have been. Scout the abandoned mining outpost beyond the settlement and gather any salvageable tech. He was to report back to the human embassy once the task was done, nothing more. Standard procedure, nothing extraordinary. As Zane moved forward, the settlement's crumbling buildings loomed over him, their jagged edges standing like broken teeth against the dusty horizon. The structure's surfaces, once gleaming and proud, were now dull and eroded, worn down by the years of neglect and exposure to the harsh conditions. It was a place that seemed to have been abandoned long ago, forgotten by all but the wind and the burning suns. As he approached a particularly dilapidated wall, something caught his eye, a flicker of movement where there should have been none. Instantly, his instincts kicked in. His hand dropped to the pulse pistol at his hip and he crouched low, scanning the area for any threats. The terrain was empty, as it always was. But this movement was different. It was out of place. His heart pounded in his chest as he crept closer, his boots making no sound on the dry ground. Then, as his eyes adjusted to the dimming light, he saw her. There, in the shadow of a crumbling wall, sat a young alien female. Her skin was a pale violet, once vibrant but now dull and marred with bruises. Her long black hair hung in tangled waves, partially obscuring her face. She was thin, too thin, and her clothing, a tattered beige tank top and ripped shorts, hung loosely on her frail frame. Most striking, however, was the rusted wheelchair she sat in. The mechanisms were clearly failing, the wheels barely turning as she shifted her weight. She was bound to it, unable to move on her own. Zane's heart clenched at the sight. He had seen much during his time in the military. Suffering, war, pain, but nothing like this. The alien girl's eyes met his, large and almond-shaped, filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. It was a look that transcended species, a look that spoke of abandonment, of being left behind. His pulse quickened. He approached cautiously, holstering his weapon. "Hey, you all right?" His voice was soft, but his concern was real. She flinched. At the sound of his voice, her eyes darting nervously around her surroundings. When she spoke, her voice was weak, raspy, and heavy with exhaustion. "Family left. Burden," she managed, her words barely above a whisper as she gestured feebly toward her immobile legs. "Accident in mines. No use now." Zane's stomach twisted. He had seen enough cruelty across the galaxy to last a lifetime. But this was different. This was the kind of abandonment that left a bitter taste in his mouth, the kind that struck at the core of what it meant to be human. They just left you here to die? His voice shook with disbelief, his anger rising. He couldn't understand it. How could someone abandon another being like this? Her only answer was a faint nod, her expression a mixture of resignation and disbelief. She had been discarded, left to suffer in a broken settlement. And for what? Simply because she could no longer contribute? Zane stood there, frozen for a moment, his mind racing. Everything inside him screamed to help her. It wasn't his mission, it wasn't his job. But some things transcended duty and regulations. He couldn't just walk away from this. He stood to his full height, towering over her slight form. Humans don't leave their own behind, he said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of his conviction. I'm not leaving you here. Without waiting for a response, he moved behind her wheelchair. What's your name? He asked, his voice softer now. Elira, she answered, surprise evident in her voice. I'm Zane, he said, offering a slight smile. And you're coming with me. Elira's eyes widened, but she didn't protest. There was something about Zane's presence, his tone, that made her believe him. Perhaps it was the first time in a long while that someone had shown her kindness. Perhaps it was the first time someone had seen her as more than a burden. Together they moved away from the desolate outskirts of the settlement. Zane pushed her wheelchair carefully, each turn of the rusty wheels making a soft screeching sound in the otherwise silent air. Neither of them could have known at that moment that this simple act of compassion would set in motion events that would change the course of their lives forever. As they walked, the twin suns dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the wasteland. The ruins of the settlement loomed behind them, a symbol of the past. But ahead there was only the unknown. A future that was uncertain, but one that for the first time seemed full of possibility. The human embassy on Drakvath was a modest establishment, tucked away in the corner of a once thriving colony now, reduced to a few scattered structures. The walls of the embassy compound were fortified and guarded, with sentry towers standing tall above the barren landscape, their flashing lights scanning the horizon for any potential threats. Though the facility had been a symbol of human strength and diplomacy on the planet, it now felt like a lifeboat adrift in a sea of isolation. As Zane wheeled Elira into the embassy, the stark contrast between the dusty wasteland and the relative safety of the compound was jarring. The air inside felt cooler, though it still held a faint odor of machinery and stale food. The guards at the front desk barely glanced up as he passed, their expressions impassive, used to the routine of soldiers coming and going. But for Zane, this moment felt different. It was no longer just another mission. This was personal. Where are we going? Elira's voice was weak but curious, the quiet rasp in her words betraying the exhaustion that still clung to her. She had been through so much, and though her body had begun to heal, the emotional scars were far from gone. Her violet skin, once dull from neglect, was beginning to regain its natural luster, though it still carried the marks of the violence she had endured. Just follow me, Zane said, his voice steady but firm as he pushed her wheelchair through the narrow hallways. His thoughts were a whirlwind, his mind racing with what came next. He had no clear plan. His superiors would certainly have questions. But right now, all that mattered was getting her settled and ensuring she was safe. They passed through a few rooms, some empty, others filled with a handful of human diplomats and soldiers. The occasional murmurs of conversation faded into the background, but Elira felt the weight of each curious glance. She had never seen a human up close before, let alone been in a place so foreign to her kind. She couldn't help but feel a little out of place in this strange, sterile environment. Zane stopped outside a small utilitarian room at the end of the corridor. It was nothing special, with a single bed against the wall, a small table, and a chair by the window. It had the feel of a temporary space. Nothing that would make her feel at home, but it would suffice for now. This will be your room for the time being, he said as he wheeled her inside. Elira looked around, her eyes scanning the bare walls. It wasn't much, but it was more than she had expected. Thank you, she whispered, her voice softer, now laced with a hint of gratitude she hadn't been able to express earlier. You're welcome, Zane replied, though he wasn't sure what to say next. He hadn't planned this far ahead. I'll get you something to eat, he added awkwardly, before stepping back toward the door. As his hand touched the handle, he paused and turned back to her. "I'll make sure you get the care you need, Elira. No one will hurt you here." There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice barely audible. "Why? Why are you helping me? I don't understand. Humans don't care about us." Her words hung in the air, fragile and unsure, like a question that had been waiting for an answer her entire life. Zane stood there staring at the floor for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally. The words felt simple, but they were the truth. Because no one should ever be abandoned like that. No one should be left to die, no matter who they are. She looked up at him then, her large almond-shaped eyes filled with something that resembled hope. It was faint, but it was there. "Thank you," she said again, her voice steadier now. Zane nodded, then left the room, quietly closing the door behind him. As he walked back down the hall, he felt a sense of responsibility weigh heavily on his shoulders. This wasn't just about doing the right thing anymore. This was about protecting someone who had been cast aside by the very people she was born to. He knew that once the authorities found out about her, things could get complicated. But now there was one thing he could control: Elira's safety. The days that followed were filled with quiet tension. Zane's superiors, including Commander Kessler, had yet to inquire too deeply about the alien girl in the room. Perhaps they had assumed it was another routine diplomatic issue, or maybe they hadn't noticed her presence at all. But Zane knew that this wouldn't last. Soon, they would have questions. The fact that he had broken protocol to bring her in was already a violation, and if anyone found out about her true nature, it could lead to a diplomatic crisis. Humans and aliens had a complicated history on Drakvath, and relations were fragile, at best. But for now, Zane focused on keeping Elira safe. He had contacted a few people in the embassy who might help her without asking too many questions. One of them was Dr. Rhett Cormack, a medical officer who had treated a variety of alien species during his time in the military. Zane trusted him, but he knew that involving him meant opening up a whole new can of worms. Still, he didn't have a choice. Elira needed care, and he wasn't going to let her suffer in silence. Meanwhile, Elira spent her days in the small room, resting and recovering. She was still weak, but the food and the care Zane had provided seemed to help. Every now and then, he would check in on her, bringing her fresh water or small talk, anything to make her feel less alone. She didn't speak much, but Zane could sense that she was starting to trust him. He couldn't help but wonder about her past, the family that had abandoned her, the culture that had deemed her unworthy. He wanted to ask, but he knew better than to push too hard. When she was ready, she would tell him. It was late one evening, a week after he had brought her in, when Zane's comm device buzzed with a message from Dr. Cormack. "Meet me in the medical wing. We need to talk." With a sigh, Zane stood up from the chair in the hallway, feeling the weight of his decision bear down on him. He had promised Elira safety, but in doing so, he had opened a door he couldn't close. Soon, he would have to face the consequences of his actions. For now, all he could do was hope that he was doing the right thing. As he walked toward the medical wing, Zane's thoughts raced. This was only the beginning. He could feel it in his gut. Whatever was happening with Elira, whatever had happened to her, was about to become much bigger than a simple act of kindness. And as much as he feared what was coming, he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to let her face it alone. The hum of machinery echoed throughout the medical wing as Zane stepped into the sterile white room, its walls lined with various scanning equipment and diagnostic tools. The quiet was almost suffocating, broken only by the occasional beep of a monitor or the shuffle of footsteps. Dr. Rhett Cormack, a compact and shrewd man with a few streaks of gray in his short hair, stood by a counter, flipping through data on a tablet. His sharp eyes were glued to the screen, but Zane could sense the tension in the air. Rhett had always been a man of few words, but today, Zane could tell he had something important to say. "You wanted to see me?" Zane asked, his voice low, as he moved toward the doctor. Dr. Cormack didn't look up immediately, continuing to scroll through the tablet before finally meeting Zane's gaze. "Yeah, I've been looking over some data," he said, his voice carrying a hint of concern. "There are things about Elira's condition that don't add up." Zane's brow furrowed as he took a step closer. "What do you mean? She's been recovering well. The injuries she sustained aren't life-threatening." "It's not about her physical injuries," Rhett replied, his voice dropping a few notches in intensity. "It's about her biology." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The scans I ran show anomalies, significant ones. I'm not sure how to explain it, but it seems like her body's healing at a much faster rate than any species I've encountered before. It's almost as if—" He trailed off, glancing back down at the tablet, his fingers tapping against the screen as if searching for something he hadn't yet found. "What?" Zane asked, his voice tight with worry. "What is it, Doc?" Dr. Cormack hesitated, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. "It's like she's evolving," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Her body's adapting to something. I'm not sure if it's a genetic mutation or something external, but her neural pathways are regenerating at an alarming rate. And there's something else. Something that I can't quite place. It's like her biochemistry is responding to, well, to you." Zane blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean, to me?" "I don't know yet, but it seems like there's a connection," Red explained, his voice full of skepticism and curiosity. "Her neural activity increases when she's near you, and I'm not talking about any normal physical attraction. It's more than that. Like her biology is somehow syncing with yours. I'm running more tests, but it's also—" He trailed off again, unable to fully articulate what he was discovering. Zane felt a knot form in his stomach. "So, what are you saying? Am I making her worse?" "No," Rhett quickly reassured him. "But whatever's happening, it's not typical. Her body is changing, Zane. Fast. It could be linked to some kind of species-wide evolution or biological adaptation that we don't understand. We need to figure out what's going on before it gets out of hand." Zane nodded slowly, his thoughts racing. "What does this mean for her, Doc? Is she in danger?" Rhett hesitated for a moment, his expression troubled. "Not necessarily, but whatever is happening, it's not natural. It's almost like—" He trailed off again, looking at Zane with an intense gaze. "It's almost like she's undergoing a transformation." The word hit Zane like a punch to the gut. He had known that Elira was more than just a wounded alien girl in need of help, but this was something far more complicated. "A transformation," Zane repeated under his breath, his mind trying to process the new reality that was unfolding before him. "What kind of transformation?" "That's what I need to find out," Rhett said, his tone grim. "But I can tell you this much, it's not a typical recovery, and it's not something she's going to be able to hide for long." The thought of Elira's transformation worried Zane more than he cared to admit. If she was evolving in ways they couldn't predict, if her body was changing in response to something as strange as their bond, what would that mean for her future? And what would that mean for their relationship? Before Zane could ask another question, the door to the medical wing opened with a soft whoosh and Elira rolled in, her wheelchair clicking softly against the smooth floor. She looked around, her large violet eyes scanning the room with curiosity. She was still recovering, but the faint signs of her earlier weakness seemed to have faded. Her skin, once dull, now glowed faintly in the soft light of the medical facility. Zane stepped toward her, his hand automatically reaching out to steady her wheelchair as she maneuvered closer. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, his voice softer than before, as if her sudden presence had made him realize just how much he'd begun to care about her. Elira nodded, though there was a certain weariness in her gaze. "I feel better," she said, her voice still, hoarse but more confident than before. "But I feel strange, like something inside me is changing." She paused, looking up at Zane with a searching look. "Is this what it feels like to heal? I don't know what's happening to me." Zane glanced at Rhett, who stood in the background, his face unreadable. "We're still trying to figure that out," he said, his voice steady. "But for now, you're safe here." Elira's eyes softened, though there was still a lingering sadness in them. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't think anyone would care." Zane's chest tightened. "Everyone deserves a chance," he said almost to himself. He had promised her that she wouldn't be abandoned again, but now, he wasn't sure if he could keep that promise. What if whatever was happening to her was too dangerous? What if they couldn't stop it? The silence in the room stretched, heavy with the weight of unspoken thoughts. Finally, Elira broke it, her voice quiet but clear. "You're afraid, aren't you?" Zane looked at her, startled by her insight. "Afraid?" he echoed. "Yes," she said, her gaze steady. "Afraid of what's happening to me. Afraid of what I might become." Zane felt a chill run down his spine. "I'm not afraid of you," he said quickly, though the words seemed hollow even to him. "I'm afraid of what might happen if we don't figure this out." Elira nodded, her expression unreadable. "I'm not afraid of what's happening to me," she whispered. "I'm just afraid of being alone again." Zane stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone," he said firmly. "Not anymore." But as he looked into her eyes, he couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead was far more dangerous than either of them could have imagined. The connection between them was growing stronger, and with it came an undeniable bond that neither could fully understand. But one thing was certain, their fates were now tied together, and whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side. And yet, despite the comfort of that promise, Zane couldn't help but feel the weight of what they were both about to face, the secrets behind Elira's transformation, the political implications of harboring her, and the ever-present danger that loomed over them all. The storm was coming, and it was only a matter of time before it reached them. The days that followed in the embassy were filled with unease. Zane found himself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The quiet moments with Elira, as she continued her recovery, were fleeting, but meaningful. He could sense the transformation happening within her, though it was subtle and hard to define. But even more pressing were the mounting challenges outside the walls of the embassy. The situation was no longer contained to a personal act of kindness. It had become a ticking time bomb, and Zane was all too aware of the fragility of their position. Elira's condition was both miraculous and unnerving. The rapid regeneration of her neural pathways and her body's sudden strength were not just signs of physical healing. They hinted at something more profound, something biological and almost otherworldly. The medical scans had confirmed it. Her body was adapting in ways that no alien species had ever been known to do. It was as though she were becoming something entirely new. One evening, as Zane returned to his quarters after a long day of briefing sessions, he found Elira sitting in the corner of his room, her legs dangling over the edge of a chair. The deep glow in her skin had faded, but faint patterns of light still traced the contours of her body. It was as though she were alive with energy. And yet, there was an air of quiet contemplation about her. "How are you feeling?" Zane asked, his voice gentle. He had grown accustomed to her presence, though he still couldn't quite shake the sense of responsibility that clung to him every time he looked at her. "Better," she replied softly, her eyes meeting his. "But I don't know what this feeling inside me. It's like I'm changing, but not in a way I can explain." Zane moved toward her, sitting down across from her. He watched her for a moment, uncertain of what to say. He had promised to protect her, but now, the line between protector and companion was becoming increasingly blurred. It wasn't just about keeping her safe anymore. It was about understanding her, and understanding the mysterious transformation she was undergoing. "I don't know what's happening to you either," Zane admitted quietly, "but I promise you I'll do everything I can to help." Elira looked at him, a flicker of something softening in her eyes. "You've already done more than anyone ever did for me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "My family, my people, they left me behind. But you took me in. You cared for me when no one else would." Zane felt a pang in his chest. It was true. The way she spoke about her people, her family, was like a heavy weight that had settled inside her. She had been discarded, left to wither away in the dust. But Zane, despite the risks, had shown her kindness, something she hadn't experienced in so long. It made him want to protect her even more, to ensure she would never feel that isolation again. "Elira, Zane began, but his words faltered. He didn't know how to express what he was feeling, what he had come to realize over the past few weeks. But before he could continue, a sharp knock on the door interrupted him. It was Dr. Rhett Cormack, standing in the doorway, looking tense. "Zane," he said, his voice grave. "We need to talk. Now." Zane stood up immediately, his concern rising. "What's wrong?" "It's about Elira," Rhett said, stepping inside. "We've been monitoring her condition, and there's something I need to show you. It's important." Zane exchanged a quick look with Elira, who raised an eyebrow in silent question. "What is it, Doc?" Zane asked, his voice filled with urgency. "Come with me," Rhett said, motioning toward the door. "We need to go to the medical wing." As they walked through the corridors of the embassy, Zane's mind raced. What could Rhett have found? Had something gone wrong with Elira's treatment? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he kept his pace steady, trying to keep his worry in check. They arrived at the medical wing, where Rhett led them to a private examination room. Inside, a set of monitors hummed, displaying Elira's most recent medical scans. Zane stood beside Rhett as the doctor gestured to the screen. "These scans show something strange," Rhett began, his voice low. "I've never seen anything like it. Her nervous system is regenerating at an exponential rate. But the real issue is the neural connections between her and, well, you." He paused, looking at Zane with concern. "What do you mean?" Zane asked, his voice rising slightly. The tension in the room was palpable. "I've been running some tests on her neural pathways," Rhett explained, "and there's a distinct pattern that shows her brain activity is syncing with yours. Her biochemistry is reacting to yours, specifically your adrenaline, your brain waves, even your emotions. It's like her body is adapting to you." Zane's mind reeled. "You're saying we're connected?" "Not in the way you think," Rhett clarified quickly. "It's not just emotional or physical, it's biological. Her body is changing, but it's doing so in response to something that involves both of you. And it's accelerating. This could become unstable if we don't understand what's driving it." Zane's eyes widened as the weight of Rhett's words sank in. The connection between him and Elira was not just a chance occurrence. It was something that was altering both of them, something they couldn't control. The bond they shared wasn't just emotional, it was biological, and it was only growing stronger. "What happens if this keeps going?" Zane asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Rhett admitted, "but we have to find out before it's too late." As the doctor's words hung in the air, Elira shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her violet skin faintly glowing under the harsh lights of the room. "What does this mean for me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It means we need to figure out what's happening to you," Rhett said, his tone softening. "But we also need to keep you safe, Elira. Whatever this is, it's going to make you a target. There are forces out there that won't want you to survive this transformation." Zane's heart skipped a beat. He had always known that Elira's presence in the embassy was risky, but now with this new information the stakes had become even higher. Whoever, or whatever, was behind this transformation would stop at nothing to reclaim her, to use her as an asset, or eliminate her as a threat. The door to the examination room slid open with a quiet whoosh, and a voice called out from the threshold, "Zane, Elira." Commander Kessler's gruff voice filled the room, his tone hard. "We need to talk. This situation is spiraling out of control, and it's only a matter of time before we're exposed. We have to make a decision. Now." Zane exchanged a look with Elira. Everything had changed in a matter of hours. And now, they had to face the consequences together. "Let's go," Zane said, his voice firm. "We'll figure this out. Together." As they left the room, heading into the unknown, the weight of their situation settled heavily upon them. Their bond had grown deeper, more powerful than either of them could have anticipated, and now they would have to navigate a galaxy that might not be ready for what was coming next. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers and enemies both known and unknown. But one thing was clear: Zane and Elira were no longer just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with, and whatever came their way, they would face it side by side.